part of the presentation, I'm not going to give you any PowerPoint slides. It's more going to be hands-on. So one of the things that you're going to find as you compost, or as you compost more and more, or you're managing a site and you're really trying to recover the maximum amount of food waste, is there are better and worse ways to try to set up your collections. But having a system for your collections is ultimately more effective for capturing your organic waste and raising kind of mindfulness about zero waste practices. So the kinds of things that when people come onto your site that they might be doing or using, if they're intending to throw them away at any point, they might throw them away at your site. And also, folks are throwing away things all the time. And community gardens, your sites may also be a hub where people are really stewarding all kinds of environmental resources. So I recommend in any site that you are stewarding to have some sort of source separation opportunity, and how complex and deep into the community you want to make that, I would really relate to the capacity that you have to steward that space. And related to the things that you anticipate generating in the course of your activities. So, for this event, we intended to set up a simple source separation, so you all have been kind of using it, seeing how it can get kind of messy and how it can be tended and be cleaned up. This is also something that's deeply impacted by how you orient in the planning of your space. So for example, we kind of asked people not to bring food. We asked them not to bring like things that we thought would create trash, as in an effort to limit like the impact on what we would be processing in this space. So that kind of communication is helpful, and also providing for the needs of people in your space in a way that minimizes the waste that's going to be generated as a result of meeting those needs. That's the front end, and it may not seem that important right now, but like the more you get into trying to do zero waste, the more you realize it's all front end. We just do everything on the front end so that we don't have anything to do on the back end, because the back end can get kind of messy. So you're familiar with this. Basic, what we've been up to is collecting food waste. So as far as our system, we're just creating a receptacle to capture it. This is the sign that we have at the farmer's market, which is really cute. Totally willing to share a copy of this flyer. It has cute little watercolors that were made by Elizabeth and Lynn to tell people what to compost, what not to compost. We encourage people to do full spectrum, so we invite fruit and veggie scraps, we invite soiled papers, we invite natural fiber textiles as long as they're 100%. We invite coffee grounds, tea bags, juice pulp, brewery waste, plate scrapings, natural rubber and natural latex that are 100%. This is something that, like when we work with food service operators, we really try to convert them over to 100% natural latex gloves if they cannot avoid using gloves for health department regulatory reasons. We take animal products, meat, dairy, bones, eggshells, fat, whatever it is. We encourage people to throw their personal hygiene items in there. Their hair, their fingernails, their cotton Q-tips. These things can go into home scale source separation, and then any kind of like bamboo, palm leaf, you know, if people are doing like bamboo toothbrushes and they're ready to get rid of them, they could go kind of here. If they're doing a disposable event where they're choosing like a banana leaf as the plate instead of something processed, then like this could go into the composting system. Ideally, we want to find solutions that actually take care of the entire waste stream. So for me, it's more about normalizing these things and finding ways that we can like ensure the comfort and safety of the people who are processing the materials, rather than be like, oh yeah, well that one thing we'll send to the landfill. It's like, okay, well then you're still relying on the landfill system. And that's the same reason why, from our perspective, like we don't encourage systems that are not full spectrum, because we believe that it creates more confusion around what is compostable and what is not compostable, and it actually does a disservice to composting by creating a sense of a need to continue to rely on a landfill to process certain kinds of materials, which are things that are very commonly used by people, like chicken bones, you know? It's like that is a waste stream that we are actually producing as a culture, as a society, and this is a completely legitimate way to deal with that safely, and we need to start letting people know that that's true, instead of being like, oh, well, for that you need to rely on the big industrial system. And actually say like, no, that's actually a great source of nutrients for our soil. Let's figure out how to do it safely. And part of our work in this is to really ensure through the development of the application that's going to be tracking monitoring that we're doing throughout, is actually having multiple methodologies for tracking temperature through your piles. So we're actually ensuring and recording that the piles have reached the thresholds for pathogen reduction consistently, so that a manager would be able to say like, oh yeah, something went wrong with this pile and we actually didn't hit our pathogen reduction factor. So guess what? We're going to recompost that pile so that it gets exposed to those high heat temperatures through the thermophilic composting process. So our goal in developing the smartphone application is to do that. And we're going to be testing high-tech models where there's continuous monitoring with in-pile probes, and low-tech methodologies where like you as the compost manager, when you come to visit the site, are like writing down the temperature of the pile off your thermometer and inputting it into the app. And what this means is when we take community composting to scale, and that really scares the regulators because they're like, oh my God, how are we gonna oversee 10,000 community composting sites all across the state? We can't possibly visit them. It's like, you don't have to, because we have our records. You can look at them, and it's way more information than you have about anything that's happening in the industrial facility. And then we have those records to look at our own processing, to compare with each other, and to learn from each other, and to like really make sure that any composting site that's struggling has a chance to be connected with mentors and other people who are doing like hitting those numbers more consistently, to try to troubleshoot and provide the support that's needed to get anyone who might not be hitting those numbers to be able to hit them. And then in our little sign, the don'ts: don't compost plastic, don't compost metal, don't compost glass. And we have a little bit of note about paper products, helping people to understand that like glossy, laser toner printed papers, we would really encourage to go into the recycling stream rather than the composting stream, and other kinds of papers can be composted. And then what about compostable items and bioplastics is a question that we get a lot. We really encourage people to be utilizing principles of zero waste. So we encourage people to, instead of using disposables, to use reusables, and that's our way of trying to keep them out of the composting stream in the first place. In terms of whether we want them into our compost, it kind of depends on what they are. So we are currently telling people like anything that we believe to be a high-risk contaminated PFA item, so these are your molded paperboard products, we are removing them from our compost and rejecting them and encouraging people not to put them in there. Things like bamboo forks. We are including those, we're composting them. Things that are like full brown paper taco boats, we're including them. So it really depends on what they are. And then for your bioplastics that are made from like potato, corn, etc., we're currently including them, but when we see them, we really try to make a strong point of encouraging the people who are producing them not to produce them. When we consult for like zero waste events, we really like strongly discourage the use of a compostable bioplastic over a reusable. And all of this is because we have to deal with it on the back end, and we don't really of course, the research on bioplastics is not completely comprehensive. What it looks like it does is it breaks down into something that just sort of takes up a lot of space in the environment. So it's maybe inert with respect to the environment in certain regards, but it's kind of like just taking up space in your soil structure. It's not engaging the environment very well. So we're not like really wanting to encourage that to be part of our soil substrate. So this is a great tool to be able to provide to someone, a sign, something that they might post in a restaurant if they're sorting, to help educate their staff, help people to look at in their home, post on their refrigerator. We have ours at our farmers market drop-off sitting on the table. We encourage people to take a picture so they could take it home, and we can send it to them over email when we onboard them, like into our farmers market drop-off program. I'll put this guy to the side. Actually going to hand it to you because it's very windy. Now the fun part of looking at the waste that we created as a result of gathering here together this week. We collected most of the food waste directly from the plates here in this bin, and as it was filling, we were transferring it over into these yellow lidded totes. We did produce about 2 full totes of food waste coming both out of our kitchen and from just food waste around. We'll be able to weigh that later when we build the compost pile together, and we will compost it on site here at the farm. When we do source separation at farmers markets and events, we usually provide a bin, a smaller receptacle to hold a spatula. We use silicone spatulas as the best for like cleaning off plates. It really helps your dishwashing system if you provide that. And all of the plate scrapings can go into the a bin. So that being identified, labeling your bins is like super helpful, and monitoring them during your event to kind of like keep separating them out so that when people look in the bin, they will be more likely to keep putting the things in the bin where they see other like items in it and not read your signs. So if your food waste gets contaminated with plastics, people are going to start putting their plastics in your food waste bin, and they will stop reading your sign. So signs are great for the beginning, but for continuous like care, you need to have one of the people who's on your team, a volunteer or a staff member, really monitoring those to make sure that they come out well. We also had, as you guys are aware, a dish tub. We literally washed thousands of dishes. I invite you all to take a moment to imagine if we had done these disposable, how much trash we would have made just supporting us for a single week. We didn't do that. Thank you all for participating in that adventure. Also, knock on wood, no one got sick. See how easy it is? And as you saw, working with dishes, you don't need anything fancy. You can set up a 3-compartment sink with 3 basins. You can do a 3-basin sanitizing system at any community garden, at any event that you're going to be holding. It's possible to use reusables, and I would encourage you to do so. It's a one-time investment for your plateware. We have found the investment also in these like busboy bins to be really helpful for both storage and usage. So you can use the same container as your receptacles. They're easy to wash. They're light, unfortunately made out of plastic, but they don't break easily. And they can stand up to having like hot water put in them, and they don't get dented when they're manhandled. So this is the option that we've found working well. If you install permanent infrastructure in your garden, super encourage you to have a sink. It would be great if you have an area set up for dishwashing with cabinets and things that are available to be used. But just because you don't have that infrastructure is like no reason not to do it. So huge encouragement to like make sure that you have that kind of infrastructure in your space. You can see that stainless steel is nice because it stacks, it nests, it stacks, it classes up, it classes down. It's not going to break if you drop it. It's not heavy. These are the reasons to go with stainless steel. It's a little bit more expensive as an initial investment. You'll also see, and I have a lot of ceramic ware that I use in other spaces. I have all my mugs a little bit mismatched, smaller sizes coming out of like just my local thrift store. I'll go and buy like, I don't know, probably all the old ladies' tea sets that they got rid of, and then just have a bunch of teacups around. Recommendation there in terms of where you're at is if you go with the smaller cups and you're providing beverages and stuff as a way of gathering community, you don't run out as fast if you have the smaller size cup. So that's just a little heads up, and you also have less waste because people are not leaving half of their beverage in a large cup. That was this dish tub bin that we've now successfully passed through. We also had a bin for recyclables and plastics. This is where it starts to get like a lot more challenging to process the waste that's coming out of your system. So I think everyone's familiar with like CRV kind of stuff and what's basically recyclable in the state of California. It's not much actually. So whenever possible, I encourage you not to serve single serving beverages. Try not to bring them. Maybe invest in a water filter for your community space. We use in our community space like water that's filtered through a Berkey. At our farmers market, for example, we provide stainless steel cups and jugs of water that we filter, so we're not generating those items. Things like these, you can save them and get 5 cents for each one through the state of California. These are all CRV. Other plastics that we have tend to be much less likely to be recycled. So even if they are plastics number ones, which are recyclable plastic, like this one is a plastic that's fully capable of being recycled, but it's not recycled in this area. So best case scenario is to avoid it. What we do when we receive these plastics is we put them into our plastic mitigation program. Anything that we see like this that we know is used by people like farmers is we actually save these and return them to the people who reuse them and put them back into like farming systems as a tool and encourage those farmers to try to collect them back from the people that they give them to. The recyclable symbol means it's made out of a certain kind of plastic that is able to be recycled. It is able to be recycled where a facility exists that will recycle it, which in this area of like Southern California, we are able to recycle number 1, PETE plastic, number 2, HDPE plastic, and some number 5 plastics. All the other numbers are not recyclable, like pretty much like all over. So it's kind of like a greenwashing technique that was done to make people feel comfortable about using plastics because, oh, it's recyclable, when in fact it's actually not going to be recycled. In addition to that, there's many forms of the plastic that's not profitable for them to recycle, and because it's not profitable for them to recycle, it's not recycled. It's landfilled by the recycler, and that's often true of things that are cups, even though this plastic is able to be recycled and there are facilities here that are capable of recycling this. It's more profitable for them to use to recycle like other shapes and forms that work better with the processing systems that they have. Because of the way that things are sorted in the industrial scale, they are sorted by combinations of machines and human beings, and a lot of the recyclables are not able to be processed through the machines in the materials recovery facility, and so then they are not recycled.
You mentioned you return those strawberry baskets to farmers. In my experience, that at least in my area, I've heard that if you get like strawberries and they might supply you like a paper bag, they can only take it back if you give it back to them right there, but if you take it home, they can't take it back.
So
That's different everywhere.
So this is a place where we need to look at like the way the regulatory environment works, and that is the way the regulatory environment works is that they're not supposed to reuse these because of health department regulations. But as you move away from large outward facing systems to like smaller scale farmers, they are washing and sanitizing the containers that they're using to harvest and distribute produce. So this is a place where the rules of the game are oriented towards production and liability prevention, and they're not oriented towards resource conservation and sustainability. And so this is a place where I encourage you to think of laws as agreements, because that is what they are. And when the agreements are actually not serving the public good, it's time to change the agreements. And the agreements change by rejecting agreements that make no sense with respect for justice, sustainability, and like long-term care of the earth and each other. And so simultaneously not complying with things that don't make sense, but also like articulating the reason why they don't make sense, advocating for other policies, advocating for other materials, and that's how you get changes. Unfortunately, really being unrolled or rolled out, I guess, right pre-COVID, you had across Los Angeles County regulations where like people were able to bring reusables into restaurants to have them be reused, and that starts going to a space where you can actually start to remove the disposables when you create avenues that allow people to have alternatives, and eventually make those alternatives the kind of status quo. So this isn't very sustainable right now. So you can try to mitigate this by reusing this material and mitigate it and ultimately resolve it by advocating for policy changes that find more sustainable means of packaging materials that we're taking away from farmers and grocery stores.
It's also important to remind people that even though some of those things are recyclable, like those number one plastics, they're going to be recycled maybe once.
Yeah.
Into like a lower grade plastic that can then never be recycled again.
Yep, so that's a big myth. So not all recyclables are created equal. So if you have an opportunity to choose between a disposable packaging that's plastic versus glass or aluminum, I highly encourage you to choose the glass or aluminum, because those are materials that actually are able to be recycled indefinitely, inherent to the material, whereas plastic inherent to the material is not able to be recycled into the same quality of product indefinitely. So these are things that we want to try to remove from our usage. And here's like a real challenge that we have. So I'm not saying that like if you stop using this, that's all that needs to be done. We need systems change. But the reality is the system is upheld by individuals, and what individuals do does matter. So when you are raising awareness by calling attention to these things and calling the people in your community into awareness, that's helping to spread information in your community. It's helping to create more individuals who are not wanting to support this system. And simultaneously, as I encouraged before, find avenues for advocacy at both the local and a higher statewide, national level to really try to take some action on this really, really big problem that we have with this byproduct of the fossil fuel industry. So what we do with our plastics as a mitigation measure, this is very labor intensive and not what I would necessarily like want to wish on people, but it really helps you be in touch with like what you're doing and create the incentives of the labor contrary to the action, right? So like if you don't want to spend the time making eco bricks, then you're more likely to like try to avoid consuming the plastic and bringing the plastic into your life. So you don't see them now, but all the plastic films that were generated here, like for example, that were on the ice bags or packaging from any things from the grocery store, meat packaging, things that maybe came off of bars, etc. These items are plastic films. They are able to be recycled. There's very few places that recycle them. If you throw them into your recycling bin, they will not get recycled. These are things that are rejected because they clog the sorting machines at the facilities. When they are recycled, they're recycled into things like garden bender board, And if you think of our need for garden bender board and the quantity of plastics we're producing in the world, those two things are completely misaligned. So as much as possible, you want to try to reduce your consumption of plastics, and working directly with the people who source your food, for example, is a great way to do that, because you can come up with strategies and make agreements with them that actually eliminate plastics as a packaging material. What we do is we collaborate with a local natural builder, actually the same one that you saw and heard about us collaborating with at the Buena Vista Community Garden to build the composting toilet. He uses materials like these. It could be any kind of plastic bottle. These are actually recyclable plastic bottles, so you can also recycle them. They will be downgraded. We use this as the kind of structural container to make something that we call an eco brick. And what he does is he uses the eco brick pretty much for insulation in tiny homes. And how you produce one is by taking all of these plastics and literally stuffing them inside a plastic bottle. And that creates the containment vessel. It's kind of time consuming, but you can do it while you're doing other things, like be sitting on a Zoom meeting, or you know, watch, I don't know. Do y'all have time to watch TV? I don't have time to watch TV. Well, I guess for those of you who have time to watch TV, you also have time to make eco bricks. This is not something that I necessarily would hope to be doing for the rest of my life. This is very much a mitigation measure that we're doing. And we also will put plastics of this variety. We will actually cut them and mitigate them by including them as additional material in the eco brick. There are a few companies that process plastics and do recycle them. For example, TerraCycle. They have a zero waste box program where you can pay them like $300 for a box like this big, and they commit to recycling whatever you put inside of it. However, a lot of the stuff they make is a bunch of plastic junk that is maybe useful. It's like bags and things, but it's also it's just recycling this material. There's also programs such as Precious Plastic that are totally DIY, open source plastic manufacturing programs. It's a worldwide network. And they also have different things that people have thought to manufacture. Some of them are in the vein of plastic things we don't need. But I think that ultimately people could eventually be very mindful about what are the things we actually do need to be made of plastic because of the particular properties of plastic. And kind of try to funnel your recycling energy into sending things into that space. So we don't have that much plastic from this week that we spent together that's here, a little bit. And we've already eco-bricked all of the plastic. Thank you so much, Michiko, for helping with that. So moving right along, we had a surge protector that died. I will take this to electronics recycling. It's still pretty wasteful. They are just gonna pull out the wires maybe and probably throw the rest away. So electronics are a space where we don't really have good strategies for really reusing the material, even though much of the material really could be repurposed. For the most part, structures for reusing this or repairing this don't exist in our modern world right now, which is very unfortunate. So it could be a space where maybe when CalRecycle is wanting to open new funding programs, they're really promoting repair. Repair is something that we're not doing, especially for electronics, and many things could be repaired. And they are doing more and more reuse programs, and it would be lovely to encourage them to continue to expand such programs. We had a lot of cloth going around. You didn't see any paper towels, paper napkins. We did laundry a couple times during this event. We obviously used an excessive amount of towels trying to keep the flies off of our food. So this was a little bit more than we normally do. As we mentioned at the Buena Vista Eco Farm site, doing laundry and gray water systems are something that's very compatible with community garden spaces. This is an idea that I love. We haven't materialized it yet, but I encourage anyone who's interested in kind of utilizing the garden space as a community laundromat. that can function off-grid. It can function in a very small structure that does not need to be permitted. The water used there can feed high water crops that are of cultural and like climate relevant importance. They're great systems to feed sugarcane, bananas, and things that people really enjoy eating. And that water, let's face it, that's used to do the laundry would otherwise be going into just the wastewater system, and it can instead go into our soils. We used throughout this entire project, I didn't bring it over, but Oasis gray water as our soap. Was really mindful you need to be really mindful about what soaps you're putting into the environment when you're throwing these things into the ecosystem. Last but not least is our items that we don't quite know what to do with. I don't know if this one's broken too. I know there was one broken one, but I haven't seen it, so I'm going to test that one. We have a couple different things in here. These wet wipes are definitely something that I always encourage us not to have in the event spaces if at all possible, but we actually usually eco-brick them when they come to us. This is paper, so it could actually go in here. Oh, this is a very common one that we get, very, very sad item. It's paper, receipt paper. This kind of paper is the thermal paper. I encourage you not to touch it when your hands are wet. The transfer of BPA from this paper to your hand when it's wet is like exponentially higher than when it's dry, just as an FYI. Don't compost these. These are covered in BPA plastic. That's how the ink works. If you do have a system that utilizes a cash register, I recommend you to get an old used one, ideally one that prints and is actually using ink rather than these thermal papers. These are kind of like a major toxin. What we currently do with them is still recycle them. Unfortunately, the recycled paper stream is very, very contaminated with BPA. This is important consideration if you're also using a composting toilet and or if you're using toilet paper in your life. Please don't buy recycled content toilet paper if you want to not have BPA exposure. BPA exposure is very high in paper, and your moist skin, especially for women, is a space where BPA can actually transfer over into your body when you're touching, you know, your very like sensitive membranes that are wet with a paper product that's contaminated with BPA. So we currently do choose to recycle these kind of with the understanding that the paper stream is already extremely contaminated, and rather than additionally contaminate our soil, to kind of keep this BPA locked up in the recycled paper stream and understand like what we can and cannot use recycled paper for. This is also true of recycled paper content that's maybe going into your composting system because it's soiled. As just a reminder, if you have a choice about what kind of paper content you buy and you're thinking you're going to compost it, I would avoid recycled paper content. So what do we want to do with this, given that dialogue? Do we want to recycle it and put it into a contaminated paper stream? Do we want to landfill it and put that contamination into the landfill area?
Recycle.
Yeah, what happens if we burn it?
If you burn it,
I mean, not in a large quantity, not like in 10 tons or something.
if you burn it, then the carbons from the paper will be released into the air, and also the plastics will be, I think, volatilized into the air. So they will go into the air and be dispersed in the environment. So it will be somewhat like composting it, except for you may dilute it enormously and disperse it, which is kind of an issue that's already existing. However, hopefully one day we will clean our air and our oceans, and maybe we'll make our lives easier if we're not adding to that. We could eco-brick it. One of the things about eco-bricks is they generally don't contain mixed organic and inorganic compounds, because the organic compounds can decompose inside the eco-brick and actually cause them to like expand and contract within the structure of the wall of the eco-brick.
So smart.
Well, so there's the option of recycling it and putting it into the recycling stream and keeping the recycling stream contaminated, or the option of sending it to landfill, which is also very contaminated, and just having all the contamination in one place, but sort of in one place because also it moves into the water stream.
Landfill.
Paper mache.
Paper mache.
It's gonna be wet and then you're gonna get all the BPA.
I kind of like the paper mache idea though. We protect ourselves from the BPA while we're making the paper mache. Then we will separate it from the environment and make it into something that does good. Look at this generative conversation we just had. Now we have to save all our receipts for paper mache. So the last piece of waste that we generated a lot of, which was very unanticipated, is this. I'm gonna pick this one up because it's stuck to this and I don't have to touch it. Is this very sticky fly trap. I think we definitely got this motivated from a state of desperation. So perhaps we could have had better planning on our part. We did know there would be flies. We were assured that the flies would be died down due to the hot weather that we had last week, but this is a result of that quandary we found ourselves in. I am also feeling in a quandary now of what to do with this. My guess is this is probably going to go to landfill. In terms of eco-bricks, it's a mix of synthetic and organic materials, so it doesn't qualify for being eco-bricked due to the large quantity of fly carcasses stuck to it. So, yeah, so Charlotte's saying, like, we're human and maybe we have better things to worry about than this, but we can't apply that mentality to everything. But we should have some limits of, like, there's a few things that are going to get by us. And I think this is going to be one of the things that is going to get by us and unfortunately contribute to the use of the landfill system. But we had lots of ideas in the back about how we might catch flies. They were like, let's smear honey on things because we found the honey was an excellent fly trap. It works much better than this, actually. Yeah, we did make some fly traps in the kitchen with vinegar and things. They didn't work as effectively as these, but should we be here next year?
Yeah.
We're gonna try to make a different plan for this.
Bring my electric fly swatter.
Electric fly swatters, vinegar fly traps. We will try to proactively prevent this supporting of a company that produces pesticides and plastic. In the scheme of things, from this event of like 80 people for 7 days, this is what we're sending to the landfill. I mean, we have more fly traps, but basically less than 1 bin of fly traps is going to be what's happening. This is what happens when you source separate. It's very easy to deal with when you're proactive. I asked Randy to bring over a trash can from the farm where there's a place where they're not currently doing any work around that. So you could just have an idea of what might happen if you don't bother to source separate. What is the thing that's likely to happen if you're just serving the general public and whatever they happen to bring in, especially if you're hosting a space that's educational. You're going to get exposure to a lot of the things that are marketed to children, and your trash is going to look more like this. And when we look at something like this, it might feel like much more challenging to like engage with, right? Well, we can straight up look at this. Okay, if this just went to the landfill without us doing anything about it, we're trapping this water resource away from the world for like all time. That's a really common thing to happen within plastic bottles. So we can remove that from the system and give it to this Bermuda grass. So that takes care of that item. Ooh. What else do y'all see in here? What should I go for next? The Lunchable packages. So let's see. What is that? Number 7, other plastic, not recyclable. So there's basically nothing you can do with this except for send it to the landfill or engage in plastic mitigation. It actually is a code that is very hard to even know exactly what it is. So we have a whole bunch of these. How would you avoid having this trash at your site if you were having a bunch of children coming for a field trip? How could you not have this come to your site? Ask them not to bring Lunchables.
Just tell them we are serving food at the location.
Tell them you're serving food at the location. Any other ideas?
What we would want them to do before they come here? Or like,
Yeah, what would you say to someone who you thought might bring these Lunchable containers before you invite them to your site so that they might not bring this onto your site?
please bring food in a reusable container.
Please bring your food in a reusable container. Okay, so we have 3 things. Please don't bring Lunchables or things that you're going to throw away on site. Please bring your food in a reusable container. And we're so happy to have you, and we're going to be serving you a zero waste meal on site. Yeah, so maybe having it in a reusable container or having it on site are ones that actually eliminate that waste from happening at all rather than just it happening somewhere else. So that's great. That's going in the EcoBrick box. What else do you see?
Food wrappers.
Food wrappers like these. Soft plastic, so these can be eco-bricked, but we would prefer not to, and I think that you could engage the other solutions that you just put forward as possible ways of dealing with this kind of trash. What else do you see in here? Capri Sun, that's also like a plastic film. I understand it's a little bit hard for you to see. What's something that's not a plastic film? Juice boxes. Yeah, those are also a composite material. Those are real nasty ones to deal with. So these juice boxes are also something that is a Tetra Pak. So this is something that a company like TerraCycle does commit to recycling. I do believe they have a program specifically with the company that manufactures these to recycle them, but they're very difficult to recycle. Not really a good candidate for eco-bricking due to the fact that they have both paper and plastic composite. So maybe we'll save that for our TerraCycle box.
Tissues, wet wipes.
We have food waste mixed in here, crackers. Sometimes I wonder if the microbes can even eat this stuff, but I think they can. Turn our microbes orange. And then we have a few other things in here. Paper, composite with plastic. So if you want to mitigate this, something that you have to separate.
Can you separate that before you put it in like the blue bin at home, the recycle bin?
I mean, technically, yes. They usually soak them in water so that they separate, but this is going to become trash at the recycling center. There's a glove. These maybe could be washed, go into the laundry instead of the trash. I think we're kind of like coming to the end of this in terms of like weird things that we're finding in here. There's a little bit of construction material. What do you see? Oh, the straws and the cups, again, are not able to be recycled easily. We eco-brick them at the moment in terms of what we do with them. If you do have a trash, one last thing that I would encourage you to do is actually make it actually a community practice of like mitigating and raising awareness around your trash. So it may be something that you do on a daily basis. If you have a small trash, that's how I would actually recommend most doing it. Whenever you have the site open at the end of the day, try to make sure that everything is sorted and mitigated to the best of your ability. And it's really powerful to actually do this practice publicly, because you sorting through people's trash is one of the most powerful things to get them to sort their own trash. Just asking them to is not very effective, but showing them that you're actually committed enough to what you're asking them to, that you're going to do it even if they don't, is the very best strategy for getting that done. All right, well, thank you very much for doing this. I'm going to finish cleaning this up, and I hope you're feeling empowered to really take this on your sites. We don't want contamination in your compost, and this is the main way of preventing contamination in your compost, is actually getting it out of your compost.